Well, just a brief introduction to Mr. Gliklich so you know who you're about to hear. He is a remarkable man who was born in Poland in 1934 and survived Ghetto, then went on to hide in a Polish barn, and then went from there to Russia, I'm correct, to Siberia, then back again, ended up in a Russian prison, was saved with the help of a couple of Americans, and then ended up in a DP camp in Germany, ultimately joined the Irgun to help supply weapons to the Jews of Palestine, then made his way over to the United States, and in 1953 was drafted by the U.S. Army and earned a Purple Heart for his service in the U.S. Army during the Korean War. Also went on to become a very successful businessman, and he stands here today not only with his success as a businessman and obviously with his remarkable story as a survivor, but also from his point of view, his most successful attribute of all is that he was able to, together with his wife, Betty Shalom, raise 3 wonderful, successful children and grandchildren. And as he states, and I'm sure he will tell you, that because of the strength and bond of his family, he was able to survive the war. Before I introduce him to speak with you, I just want to read from his introduction to his memoirs, which was actually published by the United States Holocaust Museum, just so you have a bit of a sense of who you're about to hear. A few of us were meant to survive, not because of ourself or our deeds, but so that we Jews would survive and would bring up another generation, and they would live and build upon our great heritage. As I look at my children and grandchildren and know there was a purpose to my life. This is who Mr. Gliklich is, and he's going to share with you his story.
Thank you, the faculty, for inviting me, giving me the opportunity to tell my story. It's a story that you could have probably heard before in various ways. It's as many as survivors they are. There's how many stories. And one is more treacherous than others. I want to say that being invited to speak on the subject of the Holocaust, what is really the Holocaust? Our people have survived many Holocausts, all from starting from Amalek, Ahasuerus, Haman, and so on, and going to the pogroms, the Russian pogroms, and the blood libel, and all these things that were happening to our people. But we have survived, and we have prospered. And the reason we have prospered, we are called the people of the book. And we are the people of the book. For we have given the world culture, knowledge, and law. It is impossible to put in words or print the feeling that you get from hunger, destitute, losing all hope of survival, and not knowing when your next meal is coming from, or whether you will ever eat, or being so cold that you actually lose consciousness. Now that cannot be put in words. But this is the life that we had during the war. Can one in words put this in words or print or say it? I can't. Can I convey this to you? I can't. I can only tell you it is a feeling of total despair, total loss of life, and total surrender to whatever comes. I was born in a town called Nisko. It's about 30 kilometers south of Krakow. So if you look at the map of Poland, and you go, Krakow is right over there, you go south 30 kilometers, that's where I was born. It was a small town, very tranquil, peaceful, and prosperous. It was prosperous more than other because it was an industrial town. There was a factory nearby called Stalowa Wola, which was producing weapons. And a lot of people were working there, so the town was prosperous. My father owned a business, he owned a butcher shop, we owned a house. My grandfather had a farm, beautiful large farm, where he had animals. He had cows, horses, sheep, chickens, and everything there is, he had on the farm. He and my grandmother took care of it. Now, my grandfather was a Hasid. He had a beard, long beard, and he was a Belzer Chassid. It was called the Belzer Chassid. He was following the Belzer Rebbe. There was a sheep, actually a ram on his farm, and I was given that ram. The ram had curly horns, and I would sit on that ram and run around the farm. It was my pet. He would follow me wherever I went. As I said, it was a tranquil time, and everybody was happy. All of our neighbors and friends were Polish. They were not Jewish, they were Polish. And there were people that we associated with and had friends. My friends were all, most of them Polish. When I was 3 years old, I was wrapped in a talit and taken to the cheder. Now the cheder, of course, as you all know, is what you call today is Hebrew school. But you were 3 years old, the custom was they would wrap you in a talit and take you there. After that, I was a student at that cheder. At 6, I started public school, and I was in the first grade of public school. Now this is where I really realized the difference, that I am different than the others. And I realized how dangerous it is to be different. Now I was only 6 years old. But the custom in the Polish school was that in the morning they were praying. And when they would pray, everybody would stand up, and the Polish kids would cross themselves. Now, would put a cross on themselves while praying. And the Jewish people, children did not do that. So when we did not do that, we were beaten up. The Polish kids started beating us up because of it, and called us, well, in English would be Christ killer. I don't know if you understand that, but this was, in Polish, was that in Poland was the anti-Semitism that was there. That was their key word. That was what they would call us, Christ killers. As we were going to school, time was going on. We had in 1933, the German elected Hitler as the Chancellor of Germany. Now the Chancellor is like the president of a country. So Hitler was elected in 1933. Hitler was a terrible anti-Semite. But picture this, Hitler never pulled the trigger. He never shot anybody. He never killed anybody. So we're talking everything about Hitler. Somebody had to do that. Now let's see who did that. There was also a man called Schindler. Now Schindler was the PR man, public relations man for Hitler. And he designed a system to dehumanize the Jewish people. He and Wagner, they were dehumanizing the people, telling, advertising, putting in the various papers that a Jew is not human, that we are animals. And what's worse, they called us rats. That was the name of a Jew. That gave fertile ground to Hitler when he came to power to kill the Jews. And the idea came out of Hitler that to destroy the Jewish nation and take their wealth and finance with that money their war in Europe, the expansion of Germany into Eastern Europe. So that's where the Jewish people started really the suffering. It was not, as to say, somebody, that anti-Semitism came all of a sudden and appeared out of nowhere. It was not. Anti-Semitism throughout Europe was going back to the 12th century. The blood libel, the cholera epidemic, all these things that were happening and blamed on the Jews. And that was created through, anyway, unfortunately, through their religion, through the churches. As this anti-Semitism grew, Hitler found fertile ground on that to do what he wanted to do to the Jewish people. And this is where the Holocaust started. It did not start with the Kristallnacht. It started actually in the 12th century. That's when that really came in. As the war progressed, in 1939, the German army came into our town. They marched into our town, and I remember that even though I was a little boy, they were marching on horses and yelling, "Alle Juden aufhängen." They didn't tell that they will kill Poles or anybody else, but "Alle Juden aufhängen," meaning we're going to hang all the Jews. That was their motto when they came into town. Subsequently, they ordered all Jews to come to the marketplace, which that was like a town square, and to bring all their valuables. Now, people were doing that out of fear. If they don't do it, they'll be shot. My mother, Alva Shalom, she took my father's tefillin, which my father wasn't there at that time, tefillin and talit, and the Kiddush cup. That's what she hid, buried. Not her jewelry, that she gave out, but the Kiddush cup, the tefillin, and the talit. I have it. Subsequently to that, as the Germans, we came into the market, and somebody fired a shot. We don't know who or what happened, but the Germans fired back and shot at the people. There were a couple of hundred people in the market. Most of them got hit. I was there. I fell. And a man fell on top of me, and he was bleeding. So his blood was soaked on me. And I thought that I was hit, and later I found I wasn't. But this is what happened when all these people were dead. A lot of people were dead. When it got dark, I found my way back home. Again, everybody was so scared, they didn't know what happens next. Germans came again the next day and took us all and put us in the ghetto. What is a ghetto? Now, you probably read about ghettos or whatever there is. Let me tell you what a ghetto is. Somebody surrounds you with barbed wire and with people with guns and dogs where you cannot go or do anything. You have to stay within that particular area. And from there, we were going to be transported to Auschwitz and Majdanek. My father was in they called them the Jewish partisans. Jewish partisans when they were fighting the Germans in the woods. It was like their underground. And their partisans broke into the ghetto at night. There was a fight, and they got us out of the ghetto. Got our family out and a couple other families out of the ghetto, and we ran into the woods. In the woods, we couldn't stay long, so we had the Polish farmer hid us underneath the barn. There was a basement underneath the barn, and we were hid over there. My Zayda, my grandfather, when he ran away, he took with him only two things, the Chumash and the Gemara Baba Metzia. Later on, he made me memorize Baba Metzia. And all these years later, I remember. I can recite most of Baba Metzia by heart. But this is, as we went, we were on the farm there, hiding out for about a year. And then the Germans, the farmer found out that another farmer was hiding some Jews, and he was shot, was killed, and his farm was burned. So he made us leave. And we thought the best way to go would be to the Russian border and run away someplace where it's safer, maybe in Russia. So we went east to the Russian border. If you see with Poland and Russia, see the Poland and Russia here, right? So we went in Poland and we went here as the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic that was called Russia, all right? So we went there and we were sitting on that border right on this river, which was called San, that river right there. We were there for a while in the town called Zimna. The Germans declared war on Russia. So Russia decided to take us out of there. And what they did, Stalin, he was no, I'm giving you some politics, I hope you follow that through. If you don't, let me know. Stalin, to him, he wasn't there to save Jews. It wasn't an idea that he was doing us a favor. But the Russians took us in cattle cars. You know what a cattle car is? You know those red boxes on the train? They put us in there like herring, squeezed us in there, and they took us out and to Siberia. Now we were traveling 6 weeks. Now traveling to Siberia, picture that. You're going from here, you're going from here all the way up there. Now, Russia is 7,000 miles across. So you travel 7,000 miles to go to Russia. We came to Siberia, and in Siberia, there was log cabins, nothing else. So we had a log cabin. Now, you know what a log cabin is? I don't know, trees put together, one on top of another, right? So they put us in those log cabins, and we stayed in there, but the winter was coming. Now, Siberian winter is indescribable. temperature drops to 80 below zero. That's cold. They put us in those cabins, and we had an oven in the cabin where the fire would be burning, and to heat us and to cook or to do whatever. For food, we had to hunt. We hunted for animals in the woods, which is called the taiga. So you learned that the taiga in Siberia. We stayed in there, and they gave us work. The men were working, cutting woods, as lumberjacks. And I didn't go to school. There was no school. So none of us went to school as far as the young people. We learned only what we could from the adults that taught us, or whatever we could learn ourselves. The winter came, and it was brutal. Half of the people that were there died. They couldn't be buried because the ground was so frozen. So they were put outside awaiting the spring. We were in that throughout the winter till the spring. To me, in the spring, something occurred that I like to share it with you. I was in the woods, and I looked up, and there was a bear with cubs looking straight at me, about as far as you are. And it's looking straight at me. I froze, I was so scared. And then I started running, and the bear was running after me. And he caught me. I fell, and the bear caught me. As I was laying on the ground, the bear and the cubs started smelling me like. And the mother bear licked my head. Didn't bite me, licked my head. I must have tasted good. And they ran away. They went away. They didn't bother me. After that, many times, there must have been about 4 or 5 times more, where I encountered bears and wolves, and they wouldn't touch me. They would touch others, they would kill, they would do it, they wouldn't touch me. I don't know till today why I survived the bear, but that's what happened. Anyway, we lived in those things, then the decision was made to escape from there, and we did. We built again on the river from logs, like boats, and we got out of there and we went to a town called Bodaibo. Bodaibo was a town in Siberia, and we had to stop over there in order to have food, or in order to make some money, work, or whatever. So that's what our adults were doing. And we stayed in a town, Bodaibo, in Siberia. It's right near Irkutsk and Novosibirsk. There, for the first time, I went to school. I went to school, Russian school, and I learned some Russian, and so I had a little bit of schooling at least. We couldn't stay there long. We decided to try and get our way to Palestine, Israel. Now Palestine was also right here. You have to go to the Middle East. You go to right there. And this is where it comes from. The way to go there would be through Turkey. So we went there, and we went to a town in Uzbekistan called Tashkent. That Uzbekistan is all the way south. I mean, way out south. Called Tashkent. And then we found that the border was closed, that the British don't let anybody into Palestine. So we couldn't go. We went back to Samarkand, again traveling through Russia, and bribing whatever commissars could be bribed to get our way through there. At that time, the Russians were already advancing on the Germans, and the Germans were retreating in the war. As the Germans were retreating, the Russians were following them, and we were right behind the Russians. As the war was going, when we were coming in behind the Russians, the buildings were still burning. Places where people were running, people dead, people were all over, and we were following the front. We came to a town called Stettin. Now Stettin is a town that was German, and later in a swap, land swap that they were called it, was turned over to Poland. But it was the Russian sector. While in Stettin, we wanted to go again somehow to the American side or to wind up in Palestine. We bribed a guy that had a coal barge. You know, he was transporting coal to Berlin. And he put a box in the ship, in his boat, put us in the box and covered it with coal. So we were sitting inside the ship covered with coal. And as we were going, something happened, somebody sneezed, the Russians caught us and put us in jail. So we couldn't make that either. So we wound up in jail for about 3 weeks. Children were separated. I was a teenager by then. So for teenagers, they had a special room. It wasn't very pleasant. And after 3 weeks, one of our teenagers managed to escape. And when he escaped, he went to Berlin, and he told the Americans that they are holding us in the Russian prison. So a colonel called Colonel Fishbein, a Jewish guy, American colonel, he got a truck full of cigarettes and swapped the cigarettes for us with the Russians. So we wound up in Berlin in a DP camp, a displaced person camp, called Schlachtensee. That was, life over there started to be semi-normal, except twice a day you stayed in line to get something to eat. But at least you got something to eat. They started with schools, they started with different things, and Israel at that time was being formed. If you recall, well, I'm sure you learned, in 1948, 46, 47, 48, at that time Israel was being established, and the war was going on in Palestine. The fighting was between the British, the Irgun Tzvai Leumi, and of course the Haganah. Our group of teenagers, we did something that was organized by a Irgun man. We would go in the fields where there used to be battles and collect weapons, rifles, guns, grenades, whatever we could get. Bring it into the camp and fix them, put them in boxes, and they were marked Bibles, and they would be shipped to Israel to the Irgun. So that's how the Irgun got their weapons, that we were shipping it to them from Berlin. In Berlin, I was up to 1948. Then the Berlin Wall was being built. So you studied about the Berlin Wall, the separation of East and West. And the wall we would then, because Berlin was completely surrounded, they couldn't bring any food or anything into Berlin, and because of that wall. So the Americans, in order to save us, put us on planes and took us out from Berlin to Munich, to another DP camp called Fernwald. In there, among other things, I got a job. I was working as a movie projectionist. At least I got some money so I could eat. And from Munich, from Fernwald, we wound up and finally got a visa to come to the United States. Now, United States was like a dream. You think of United States as, no, it's my country. Yes, it is your country. But it is a country that really saved us and gave us life. I came to the United States in 1951. In 1953, I was drafted into the service. At that time, the whole war was on, and I was sent to Korea. 3 days before the armistice was signed, I was hit and sent to Japan to a hospital. From there, because I speak 7 languages, the army decided to send me back to Germany. And I wound up as an interpreter for the CIA. So that was my story on that. But when I came out of the army under the GI Bill, I always wanted to learn. I never finished high school, but I lied, and I applied to college. I applied to Newark College of Engineering, which is today New Jersey Technical Institute. In New Jersey Technical Institute, I was there. I went at night and at day. After 3 years, I got a degree in electrical engineering and electronic technology. After that, I went in business for myself, and I've been in business ever since. Thank God we made it. So that was my story. Now I'm looking on these faces here, and I have naches. Naches to look these faces, because we survived, so these faces, could build on our survival and give us a future in our glorious religion, in our teachings, and everything that we have. So thank you again for giving me the opportunity to speak. Thank you.